How's it going, guys? This is Adam from Slurve, Ship My Money on DraftKings. I'm going to be going over the pitchers for today's MLB slate for you. I'm going to start out with a couple of the guys that I like in cash games, and then move into a couple of riskier GPP plays that I'll probably target, and close out with some pitchers that I plan on stacking against that I think will be kind of sneaky stacks tonight. So the first pitcher that I would like for cash is Johnny Cueto at 10,700 on DraftKings. Kershaw obviously is just the best pitcher there is. You know, he's got the highest floor, highest ceiling, but his price at 13,800 on DraftKings and at 13,000 on FanDuel, I think it's just too high to really give you a chance to get in good hitters, especially considering, you know, tonight there's a lot of good pitchers to choose from. I don't think you need to pay up for Kershaw unless later, you know, a lot of good value hitters come out once lineups are released. Then, you know, you can look to get up to Kershaw if it makes sense. But for right now, I think I'd rather, you know, save a couple $1,000s from Kershaw to Cueto than try and, you know, squeeze in bad hitters on a night with Coors Field and a bunch of other really good matchups. So, you know, I'd really like Cueto tonight. I think he's a safe option at home against San Diego. I'm still not a huge Cueto fan. Just, you know, he got roughed up so much last year that it still makes me nervous whenever I roster him. But he's facing a San Diego team that's just been, like, pretty much historically bad this year. You know, they've got like a 58 WRC plus. They strike out a ton against righties. They just don't hit. And Cueto has struck out 22 batters so far this year, only walked 4. You know, as long as he's keeping that up, he's just not at risk. He's not putting a bunch of extra base runners on, and he's facing a team that can't hit in a pitcher's ballpark. So I think he's, you know, a really just safe, good play today on DraftKings, well, on both sites, for cash games. And then probably my favorite pitcher on the slate for any format today is Kyle Hendricks against the Brewers at 8,600 on DraftKings and 7,300, I believe, on FanDuel. You know, he's been very good against righties throughout his career. He's a guy that I've never really believed in a ton. Like, I spent a lot of last season just stacking against him and losing money. But today, you know, he's facing a very right-handed heavy lineup. The Brewers so far this year have struck out about 25% of the time against righties with a WRC plus of 87. And I think we're far enough into the season now that if you're looking at team stats against right-handed pitching, I think those numbers are probably pretty close to what they're going to be. Like, they might still fluctuate a little bit, but teams have enough at-bats against righties now that stuff like K-rate that isn't super volatile, they kind of are what they are. And so that's, for righties now, you know, I'm looking at this season's numbers mostly. You know, so like I said, you know, they strike out 25% against righties. Hendricks over his career against righties strikes out between 22 and 23%. You know, very low hard contact rate, between 24 and 25%. Low WOBA, it's around 260. You know, so it's just a really good matchup for him. Plus, it's in Wrigley with the wind blowing in at 15 miles an hour today. He's a -200 favorite. I just really like him a lot in both formats. You know, cash, I just think he's a safe play, and he's a nice mid-tier option that'll let you work in some good bats. And for GPPs, I like him because he's just a guy that doesn't jump off the page at you, especially today with so many big-name guys out there. I'm sure he'll be owned, but I don't think he'll be owned that highly. You know, it's Kyle Hendricks. Like, people don't go to make their lineups and be like, all right, how can I get Kyle Hendricks in today? So I just think he's got good upside for GPP, and he's got a nice floor for cash games. David Price is one of the GPP plays, that I like a lot today. He's facing an Atlanta team who doesn't hit well. You know, they were bad against lefties last year. Nothing in their lineup has really made me think they should be any better this year. They strike out a lot. Price has been really shaky this year. His velocity is way down, so that's why I lean Cueto over him in cash games. You know, Cueto saves you $700, and I just think he's a little bit safer against Price, especially Atlanta can't hit, but they've already had a couple good games against stud pitchers this year. But for GPPs, I like Price over Cueto. Price just offers a lot more strikeout upside. You know, Cueto's strikeout rate is closer to like 20%. Price is up around 26% over the last, you know, season plus. And so that's where I would go in GPPs. You know, take on the little bit of extra risk with Price, but make up for it with the extra strikeout upside. Vincent Velasquez, I think, is a very good tournament play today. On DraftKings, he's 9,400, which, you know, yeah, it's upper middle tier, I guess, but I don't think he'll be that highly owned because a lot of people were on him against the Mets in his last start, and he did terrible. And then you just have like the other, big name guys to pay up for today. Plus, some people are going to be on Scherzer, and people with Scherzer aren't going to play Velasquez since they're facing each other. Velasquez has huge strikeout upside. Over his career so far, he strikes out like 28% of hitters he faces with a swinging strike rate of about like 11.5%. So it seems like, that should hold up. He should continue to strike out a lot of batters. People aren't going to target a pitcher against the Nats because, the Nats are a really good team and everyone, perceives them that way. But so far this year, they haven't been a great offensive team, especially against right-handed pitching. They're striking out, between 20-21% of the time. Their WRC plus is 84. Even if you assume they're going to get a little bit better, they're probably like going to be like a league average team, and they haven't even been that yet this year, just offensively against righties, I mean. And so I think you're going to get a guy with huge strikeout upside at pretty low ownership because of the matchup and because of the other options available. On FanDuel, his price is, I believe, 7,800. So where the win is more important on FanDuel, and I wasn't expecting to recommend playing such a huge underdog, I think the price is low enough that it kind of negates him being a huge underdog because the strikeout upside's still there. And, like, percentage-wise, he's just priced a lot lower than the studs on FanDuel. Only for DraftKings because they adjust their prices based on matchup. I think Garrett Cole is in a really interesting spot today in Coors Field. It's not something that I'm going to, like, bank my night on, but you have a really good pitcher priced at 7,200 because he's pitching in Coors Field. The total today is 10. It was 12 yesterday. I think it was 11.5 the day before. So Vegas definitely has factored in, the pitching matchup. The Pirates are a heavy favorite. They're minus 147 last I looked. So, and the Rockies haven't been hitting great this year. I mean, obviously every year they do much better at Coors. So it's not so much a matchup play for me. It's just he's priced too low for his upside. I mean, he can come out and put up a really good score for you. And then you're in a spot where, you paired him with a stud in a good matchup. And, if they both come through, you just have a ton of points from your pitchers, and you have money to pay up for hitters. So I think on DraftKings only, where, they lowered his price so much, he's a really interesting tournament play. And then my final tournament play tonight would be Brandon Finnegan at 6,400 on DraftKings, or 6,300 on DraftKings, 5,900 on FanDuel against the Mets. Finnegan's a guy I like to target. I just think while he's priced low, he's got a lot of upside. And the Mets last year were a league average team against lefties, but they struck out like 23% of the time. They didn't really do anything in their lineup that makes me think that's going to change this year. They brought in Neil Walker and replaced Daniel Murphy, but Walker hits much better against righties than he does against lefties. Also, Cespedes isn't expected to play tonight, so that's another one of the right-handed bats that are out. And they're just a lefty-heavy lineup. Most of their good hitters hit left-handed. And the game's at Citi Field, so Finnegan gets a nice ballpark boost. So he's someone that I like a lot, and hopefully his ownership will be down a little bit since so many people were on him in his last start when he got negative points. So that's where I'll be going as far as like the lower tier pitcher in my GPPs. There are a lot of pitchers that you can target tonight. I'm going to start with, I think people need to start playing Coors Field more. Like, my first thought going in whenever Coors Field is in play is to find a different stack because I expect everyone to be on Coors Field. But then ownership comes out, and you have guys in the Coors Field game, are 20% owned. There were a couple guys on the Rockies last night. Reynolds and Hundley were under 10% on DraftKings, and that's in a game with a total of 12. So if you're going to have that kind of ownership every night, I think it's starting to be a pretty big mistake to not be going really heavy on Coors Field every chance you get, because basically you're just taking a game with a Vegas total of 12 and then not playing that game and playing hitters where the total's 9 at the same percentage as the hitters where the total's 12. So it's just like, I think getting to be a pretty big mistake not to be heavy on Coors Field. But having said that, there's a lot of really bad pitchers to target, and I think they all, stand out. Nolasco, lefties against Weaver, Whistler, Pelfrey, like just there's bad pitchers going tonight. But a couple of the pitchers that I want to target because they're facing really high upside offenses and they're just not going to draw ownership, I First, I like the Orioles against Jake Odorizzi. Odorizzi over his career is a lot better in Tampa, but he's also a lot better against lefties than he is against righties. The Orioles this season have a very, very right-handed heavy lineup. They've got Ricard, Machado, Trumbo, Jones, all at the top, in the middle of that lineup with, Chris Davis in between. And so far this year, they have a 122 WRC plus and a 342 WOBA against righties. They've been striking out 23% against righties, but since the beginning of last year, Odorizzi's only struck out 17% of righties, whereas he's struck out 25% of lefties. So if he isn't able to strike out righties, that negates like the Orioles' biggest flaw. And against righties, he has a 45% fly ball rate with a 30% hard contact rate. So that's a spot that I really, really want to target with the Orioles tonight at next to no ownership with one of the best offenses in baseball. And in a similar spot, you have the Astros against Nate Carnes. The game's in Seattle, so it's not as intriguing as it would be if it was in Houston. But Carnes has a 20% strikeout rate against righties compared to 26% against lefties. The Astros strike out a lot, but against righties this year, they have a 317 WOBA and 105 WRC plus. The Carnes gives up 40% fly ball rate against righties with 38% hard contact. Most of the Astros' power and their best hitters are righties, so they're facing a guy who's just going to give up a lot of hard hit fly balls, and the Astros aren't going to be popular. Plus, the Astros just steal a lot of bases too. So they have fast guys, they have guys that hit home runs. They're facing a pitcher that's going to give up a lot of hard hit fly balls to them. It's just a really interesting spot, I think. And then a couple other ones just worth touching on. I don't like them as much as the other two. Are the Cubs against Nelson. I really like that one. The wind blowing in has taken me off of it a little bit, but I'm sure I'll still have exposure. Nelson's been good this year, but he's faced a lot of right-handed heavy lineups. Throughout his career, he's been much, much better against righties than lefties. And you have a Cubs team that has a lot of really good lefty bats, and they hit really well. The total's low, so I don't think they'll be that popular because it seems like a lot of times when the total's low or the wind's blowing in, people just completely avoid Wrigley, and I don't really think you need to. And then another spot that I think is interesting, I don't know how much exposure I'll have to it, is the Tigers against Hill. He's been really good since the beginning of last year, but his strikeout rate has to come down. He's been striking out like 34%. It's higher than Kershaw over that time period. But his swinging strike rate is like 11.5%, which is good, but it's not better than Kershaw good. You assume the strikeout's going to start coming down. Last year, the Tigers struck out like 20% against lefties, but they were the second best offense as far as WRC plus goes against lefties. They've started to hit a little bit better lately, and they're a team that they were all called at the same time, so I've kind of just been expecting them all to break out at once. And I think tonight's an interesting spot to at least give it a look, to to get a bunch of right-handed power bats against a guy who has been awesome for the last season plus, but before that, he was pretty much out of baseball, so it's a spot to at least give a look. So those are my plays for today. Definitely, come over, check out the Slurve website, chat with us, go over baseball strategy, baseball in general, whatever you want to do. Good luck tonight, guys.